Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast Why You Do What You Do. The podcast talks about human development and psychology to try and help you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time we were talking about effect of parents' work, and we're going to take up on that again. 8% of 8 to 10-year-olds and 23% of 11 and 12-year-olds in a nationally representative sample of 1,500 children regularly care for themselves at home without adult supervision. And now, when I was between the ages of 7 and 9, I did that. I was a latchkey kid. And there's a lot of those kids out there. However, each child spends an average of only 1 hour alone each day. I would come home, and like I said, I would let my brothers and sisters in, and our parents worked at night, so the parents would be in bed until, about 5 o'clock that evening. So on average, between us, there would be, two to maybe about an hour for the younger ones, where we were kind of on our own, doing our own thing, and, trying to be quiet. This arrangement is available only for older children who are mature, responsible, and resourceful and know how to get help if an emergency and if a parent stays in touch by telephone. So your child should not be left alone. Your child should not be a latchkey kid until they are mature enough to be left home alone. And now you're the judge of that. Now, physically, it is not recommended that a child be left alone before the age of 10 for the simple fact that they can be snatched pretty easily. Maturationally, most people say not until they're a teenager because girls mature faster than boys, and girls are usually mature at like the age of 12, boys not till maybe later, 14. So that's where they kind of leave that, fall that in the middle of the age of 13. But you know your child best, and you know whether you can trust them home alone or not. And of course, you should tell your child that if there's an emergency, they need to call 911. I got in a little trouble for that. I tried to program that in a phone for my 3-year-old, and we kind of accidentally called 911. And I tried to explain it to him, and the lady was not very nice about it. But I didn't understand that, because you're supposed to pre-program it in there without it picking up, but it went through anyway. So, but it was in phone so that they could just press the one button and not have to remember what a 9 and a 1 and 1 is because they were, young. And when my children were younger, I didn't start leaving them alone until the oldest one was a teenager. And then I did keep in touch by phone. We had cell phones by then. And I would call and say, is everything all right? Everybody got home? Y'all working on homework or whatever? So they knew mom was still, thinking about them, wanting to know what was going on. She didn't just leave them there for a free-for-all, and if that happened, there was trouble. About 1 U.S. child in 5 is born poor, and 1 in 3 spends part of childhood in poverty. So you people who think everyone has the same amount of money, everybody has the same opportunities, blah, blah, blah. They don't, though. Let's live in reality. They don't. And if you do, you're blessed and lucky. Excuse me. Poverty can inspire people like Marian Anderson's mother to work hard and make a better life for their children, or it can crush their spirits. I chose to work harder. At one point, I had, up to 7 jobs that I was doing. I had a place I worked at part-time. Then I had a ministry I was working on, doing support groups and things. I started a charity. I was teaching adult education, through our public school system and at different places around the city. I started doing natural healing and Reiki and things. I was acting in, plays, movies, and things like that. And doing arts and crafts, trying to sell those. So I decided, we needed it. So mom was trying to make the money, Might not have made a whole lot, but, mom was trying. But there are people who just, they give up. It's too much for them. And it does crush their spirit. And you can tell these people, they're just down, and that's it. And they can't rise up, you know. And it has to do with resilience. Some people, think you just do it. Not everybody can. Not everybody's mindset is the same, and they can't overcome and just do it. They need help. Poverty can harm children's development through its impact on parents' emotional state and parenting practices, and on the home environment they create. And that's why I told my kids, I knew they were watching, they were seeing what was going on, and I told them, we'll be fine, we'll figure it out. Mom ain't gonna let you starve or have no clothes. We'll do it. And I got them convinced of that. I was like, well, if whatever mom needs to do, she'll do it. And I did. And I was told by a psychologist I'm a resilient person. So that's probably why I was able to do that. But not everybody is the same. Let's see. Ecological analysis of the effects of poverty traces a route that leads to adult psychological distress, to effects on child rearing, and finally to emotional, behavioral, and academic problems in children. And so that's why we have a portion of society that has all of these problems, and it's a social disease. And if you believe anything different, you're wrong. Sorry. Parents who live in poor housing, or have none, which have lost their jobs, who are worried about their next meal, and who feel a lack of control over their lives, are likely to become anxious, depressed, or irritable. Needless to say, because if you're worried about where your next meal's coming from, you can't be fully present, and you can't be fully present for yourself, your children, or anybody else. So that's why we have these social programs where if this is a problem for you, you should probably take advantage of these, and you hear so much about the abuse of the system. Well, you know what? I get Medicaid because I don't have health insurance. I can't afford health insurance. And when my children were younger, there came a day where we had one burrito. All the food we had in the house till I got paid the next day was one burrito. I had to take the burrito and split it in fourths and feed it to all of us for dinner. And I had a sliver. I had the butt end, which was mostly bread. And I gave them the middle part where it had more meat and beans and stuff. And then, so the next day, I went down to the neighborhood place and applied for food stamps because my children were not going to go hungry. And there were people who were telling me that that's a shame, you shouldn't do that, blah, 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 you're trash, whatever. My children were going to eat. If that's what we had to do, is get food stamps. I was paying taxes. Taxes were coming out of my paycheck. So, yeah, I didn't have a problem with it. And, I've sat in the neighborhood places for, decades. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, meeting people who are on public assistance, out of 50 people in the room, there might be 2 who are abusing the system. And you can usually tell them. They can walk in, they drive up in their Cadillac Escalades, come walking in, with their apple bottom jeans and the boots with the fur, like the song, with their gold and diamonds on, and talking on the phone. Oh, girl, don't you know I'm at the neighborhood place? Yeah, get my food stamps, And like I said, the other 48 of us there, we're sitting like this, heads down, hoping nobody sees us. Because, we're not taking advantage of the system. We're there because we need to be there, and we have to be there, and we don't want to be there. Nobody wants this except for those 2 people out of the 50 in this room. So if you people who are just on about the abuses of the system, get you some people in that room. Quit worrying about all this other crap trying to catch people. Get the people in that room, and you'll see who shows up like they show up, while the other 48 people, of us are sitting there like, We don't even want to be here, They may become less affectionate with and less responsive to their children. And of course, if they're all stressed out and worried about that, they are, preoccupied in their mind. They can't be there 100% for the kid because they're too preoccupied worrying about this stuff. They may discipline inconsistently, harshly, and arbitrarily. And of course, some unfortunate children, their parents get angry and they take their anger out on them. You should never touch a child in anger. You should not. You should walk away, take some deep breaths, then come back and have a discussion with the child and dole out whatever punishment you think needs to happen. But you should never touch a child in anger. They may ignore a good behavior and pay attention only to misbehavior. And that's something my ex-husband was guilty of. We had a little problem there. Like I said, I had set up the tally chart and we were getting allowances and things like that. And he got mad and tried to do away with all that. And more drama ensued. And, we ended up not being married anymore. So, the children, in turn, tend to become depressed themselves, to have trouble getting along with peers, to lack self-confidence, and to have behavioral problems. And of course, the little kids are depressed because mom and dad, are being mean to them, or mom or dad, whoever, are being mean to them. So of course their little selves are depressed, and of course they're having trouble getting along with other people because children learn what they live. If you're being mean and punitive to that child, that's how they're going to treat other people. Again, they're going to lack self-confidence because you're telling them that they're bad or worthless or whatever. I heard some of those messages growing up, that I was a bad person, that I was stupid, that, things I said that should have just been taken as being a kid were purposefully mean to them, that I was, bad and wrong, trying to rip and cheat and, and none of these things were true. I was just a little kid trying to have a life, But these little kids get these messages in them that they're bad. And, can't you do anything right? So then they think they can't do anything right. And so that affects their self-esteem. And behavioral problems goes without saying. If this is going on at home, you're not going to behave very well when you're out and about. And they will engage in antisocial acts. Excuse me. My middle child seemed to be more affected. He had some antisocial behavioral issues that we had to correct. Bless me, Lord. Oh my. Oh. So each kid is different. You can't judge one based on the other one. But sometimes kids will act out, and that's their way of saying, hey, I'm unhappy with the way things are going, and so I'm going to strike out, and act out. And they will unfortunately do that. This linkage of poverty, family stress, and children's social and emotional problems exists among rural, low-income white children as well as among inner-city ethnic minorities. Because a lot of people want to make it about race, and it's not about race. It's about socioeconomic status. The poor people are less well-adjusted than well-off people. But now that being said, they also have problems too, because a lot of more well-to-do people are permissive parents. They let the children just do whatever they want. Children don't learn, how to regulate themselves, and so then they get into, wild behaviors, drug addictions, and things like that. So both ends of that spectrum are not good. You need to stay in that authoritative lane. Teach your children. Let them learn life is, full of responsibilities and consequences for your actions. Don't try to control your children and be, the ultimate in charge. And don't let your children do whatever they want. There has to be that middle ground in order for the person to grow as a person. Families under economic stress are less likely to monitor their children's activities. And that's unfortunately true. We had a case here in this city where a little child was murdered. He was 4 years old, and the parents were working and had other children, and they were letting the children go out where maybe in their home country that was okay. But they let this child run the streets. The child was picked up by a child molester and murdered after he was done with him. He just threw him in the garbage like common trash. And that's a shame. But, parents sometimes make poor decisions trying to preserve their own selves, their own sanity, and sacrifice their children. And that's a shame. And lack of monitoring is associated with poor school performance and social adjustment. Because, of course, if nobody cares what you do, and you can do whatever you want, so that carries over into school, and that carries over in your relationships with your peers. And, we all know the school bullies, the bus neighborhood bullies, we all know who they were. And their home life was probably not all that great. In a nationally representative study of 11,760 children ages 6 to 17, 1/3 of those with family incomes below poverty level were behind the normal grade level for their age. And that's because home is rough. They might not be getting enough to eat. So, if your belly's growling, you're not paying attention to what's going on in the classroom. So, poverty is an issue. A father's involvement with his children tends to be related to his economic success. So, more fathers who have more money are more interactive with their children because they feel security there, and they're not stressed out. When a father feels like a failure as a breadwinner, his demeanor, oh my gosh, what is this thing? Anyway, his decline is likely to carry over to his feelings and fathering role, and to negatively affect his relationships with his children, of course, because if he feels like he's not doing a good enough job for his family, he's going to be anxious, he's going to be angry, he might resent them, because he can't live up to what the expectations of the wife and children are. So, that can be a problem. Thus, fathering is especially vulnerable to economic and social forces that affect occupational opportunities. So, being a father is a little bit harder than being a mom. I know most of you know me, and I kind of promote the female, but the facts are on that one. That being a father is actually harder than being a mom as far as occupational opportunities go. Poverty can sap parents' confidence in their ability to affect their children's development. So, if mom and dad feel bad about themselves, they're going to pass that on to the kids. And, that's why I always try to be upbeat and instill self-confidence and things like that, because the ex at the time did not do that. He had, problems with his own self-esteem and things. And I didn't want the kids to pick up on it. Now, to one degree or another, some did. But it's important that you take care of yourself and invest in yourself so your children can see that and they can develop their own self-esteem and know that they are somebody too and they are important. Lack of financial resources also can make it harder for mothers and fathers to support each other in parenting. And at one point, I had been off work for years when my youngest one was a baby, and the money was just not coming in to keep paying the bills on time and have clothes and, food. So I decided it was time for me to go back to work. And the husband didn't want that. He didn't like that. He wanted me at home. But the money was just not there. So we had a little fight about that. And I did go back to work and had to get, my mother to babysit and things. So sometimes finances can be a wedge between you all. One study looked at 9 to 12-year-olds and their married parents with incomes ranging from $2,500 to $57,000. In many of the poor families, parents worked several fatiguing jobs to make ends meet. And again, there might be great opportunity in your neighborhood, but it's not true in every neighborhood. And if you're so poor you can't afford transportation, you might have to work at the key market on the corner or the gas station on the corner, and make minimum wage, or the restaurant down the road and make maybe less than minimum wage plus tips. So you can't compare every situation and say these people could get there if they wanted to, because that is not necessarily true. That's just, ignorant thinking, labeling people, because, all neighborhoods, all cities, countries are not equal. These parents were less optimistic and more depressed than parents in better off families. Of course they were, because you're not optimistic if life is kicking you in the butt every day, and you're not going to be better off if you don't have the income to do it. They found it harder to communicate and cooperate with each other, and often fought over child rearing. Because, like I said, if you're worried about where your next meal is coming from or how you're going to pay your bills, there's some tension there. One might blame one might blame the other one. And, that spills into the relationships with the children. And it makes it harder for you two to communicate with each other, because you're blaming, you're finger pointing, instead of doing your part to make things better. You're pointing a finger. And remember, every time you point a finger, there's these pointing back at you. So worry about you. Do what you need to do. Contradictory parental messages lead to behavioral and scholastic problems in the children. And I had some of that in my marriage at the time when the children were young. I would give them, more positive, encouraging messages, and then they would hear, school ain't important, I didn't do school, more negative messages from the other party. So, and children get confused by these, like, well, which is true, and children don't have the ability to logic out, well, this person's doing better and is more well-adjusted in life than this person, so this person must be right. Children can't do that yet, so they just know what they hear, and they're emotional, and usually, like, parents aren't supposed to play favorites, kids play favorites. There's one parent they like more than the other one, and, so they might decide this parent knows what they're talking about, and they might not really, so it's a bad dynamic when you start fighting in the family. Persistent poverty can be particularly damaging. Among 534 school children in Charlottesville, Virginia, those from persistently deprived families had lower self-esteem. Of course they did, because they didn't feel good about themselves. They might have had hand-me-down clothes or, thrift store clothes while other kids were dressing up. They might have not had the good school lunches that other kids had. Of course, it's going to affect your self-esteem. It's going to make you feel like you're not as good as these other kids. Got along less with peers, of course, because if you don't feel good about yourself and other kids, and kids are mean, kids are going to make fun of other kids who are poor. It's a shame. It really is. But, it happens, and you need to just teach your kids there's going to be people like this in the world. Do your best to ignore them. And of course, that's hard to do, because especially for kids, they're very impulsive and emotional. So anytime anybody says anything like that, it's going to impact them right in the heart. So you just do your best to talk to them about it and work them, through it. And, that's all you can do. And we're more likely to have behavioral problems than children whose families experienced intermittent hardships or none at all. Because like I said, if you're having problems at home, you're going to take that out, when you go out into the world. And if you're worried about your next meal, then you're going to be cranky anyway because you're hungry. So, however, this bleak picture is not etched in stone. Parents who can turn to relatives or to community representatives for emotional support, help with childcare, and child rearing information often can parent their children more effectively. And that's the reason why I ran a ministry for 17 years and a charity for 9, trying to help people and teach people. And I was involved in, the poorer end of our city, going out there, trying to spread some hope and love and teach people, how to do things. And I was involved with an agency that, empowered women and taught them how to start their own businesses. And, they had to write a business proposal and show us how they were going to do it. And then, we help them to start this. And, and I taught them a mindset workshop to kind of how to get your head on straight. Because, yes, you're in this situation. It's not great. But other people have done it. Here's how some other people have done it. Here's how, I did it and these other people did it. And you can do it too. So if the person has community support, they can rise above their circumstances, like the old saying, it takes a village, and succeed in life. But you have to have those supports in place. Also, as we will see, some children are more adaptable than others. And like I said, I was told I was resilient, but not everybody is. Some people, they can learn and grow and adapt. Some people can't. Some people are set in their ways, or they have, mental deficiency or illness to where they cannot adapt. And that's sad, and it's going to make it harder for them. Their temperament enables them to cope more successfully with a stressful environment in some cases. And again, each child is different, and they're going to deal with things in different ways. So you can't compare apples and oranges there. The child that's more resilient and able to adapt will come out better than the child who is not resilient and everything floors them and cannot adapt to new situations. The structure or makeup of families in the United States has changed dramatically since earlier generations. And we all know that. Our grandmas probably stayed home, didn't work. Our moms probably did work. Or maybe some of y'all had moms at home. But my generation, most of us work. There's like maybe 2 out of 100 that stay at home. So in earlier generations, the vast majority of children grew up in traditional families with 2 married, heterosexual, biological, or adoptive parents. And like I say, that was in the past. And the nuclear family is not so much anymore. Today, although most children under 18 live with 2 parents, the proportion has declined drastically. In addition, many 2-parent families are cohabitating families or step families, resulting from divorce and remarriage. And that's, more and more common nowadays. You hear some, well, my half-sister or brother, my step-sister or brother, and the statistics, we don't have them right now, but the statistics are that a lot of first marriages fail, but then subsequent second marriages succeed because they learned in the first marriage what they wanted in a partner, what they would accept in a relationship, and so subsequent relationships are more successful than first failed ones. There also are a growing number of other family types, including single-parent families, gay and lesbian families, and grandparent-headed families. And I think we all probably know that that's the thing. There are some of us who raise grandchildren because their parents were doing one thing or another that wasn't good for their children, and the grandparents stepped up to the plate. The proportion of all households in which a married couple live with their biological, adopted, or stepchildren fell from about 40% to only 24%. So our American family is falling apart. Now, we're patching it up as best we can, but in order for us to do better, we need to be more accepting of other people's children. I hear we had actually a case in this neighborhood I mean, where a stepfather did not like the woman's child, and he and his biological child murdered this child. I mean, that's complete insanity. And they were convicted. So, I mean, if you can't love a person's child, don't marry that person. And if you're doing stuff like that, you shouldn't be married to anybody. You should be locked up forever and never get out, really. Other things being equal, children tend to do better in a traditional two-parent family than in a divorced single-parent or step family. And that's because, children need those early relationships. We imprint on a mother and a father, a feminine and a masculine, and that's what we imprint on. And when you take that away, that leaves a gap, a hole in the child's life, and that can be hard to fill. However, structure in itself is not the key. The parents' relationship with each other and their ability to create a favorable atmosphere affect children's adjustment more than does marital status. So the happier you make your home, the more inducive to, teaching them how to be a good person, the more you provide learning opportunities, the more you show love, the more how you teach them to be a decent person and interact with others in a decent way, the better off the child's going to be, whether they're in a divorced home or not. And that's where I'm going to leave you today. I hope that help you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Until next time.